The title of the today's session is Cognitive Structures. And although we will not get into the process of cognition today, that is left for the time when we start talking about processes, we actually can start talking about slightly more precisely what we have in our minds. So this is a very interesting quote from Xenophanes, and basically what it says that we imagine, regardless of who we are, we imagine our gods alike to us. So it is a little bit kind of reversing the story about how God created humans. This is about humans creating gods, or at least depicting them, so that we imagine the gods like that. But this is not obviously limited to the gods. So I don't know how many of you like science fiction, but if you think about how aliens are portrayed in science fiction movies, they are a little bit smaller or taller than us. They might be a little bit on the green or the blue side. They might be thinner or wider somewhat, a little bit smaller or bigger eyes, but that's it. Otherwise, they pretty much look like humans. Why are they not microscopic? Why don't they fly or live in water or have completely different shapes, or 17 eyes instead of 2, or 5 legs, or so there is, or why they have legs at all? So it is why, because we cannot imagine what the aliens look like. We know what we look like, and then we try to make it a little bit different. The only movie that I know that was certainly different was the Arrivals, which is also a very good movie to watch for this class, because it has very interesting things to say about language, and that there is a lot of interesting stuff about the tacit and the explicit knowledge that you can observe. And generally, it is also a very interesting movie. I did not tell you anything about the plot and the really interesting stuff that is happening there film-wise, so still worth watching. So let me start from a slightly different place, but this is going to be a recurring piece of literature. Does anyone recognize where the two pictures are from? I don't mean which website. It is about a book, an illustration from a book. I hope that all of you have read that book at least 5 times. Okay, you don't have to know by the illustration. It is The Little Prince, and The Little Prince is a fantastic source of insight for everything that we do in this class. So this is about a Turkish astronomer in the Little Prince, and it says that the Turkish astronomer discovered a new planet. And that's a huge deal in the astronomical community. So he went to this next big congress of astronomers, and in order to honor the occasion, he put on the nicest national wear that he had. And in that dress up, he delivered his fascinating presentation about the discovery of the new planet. And what do you think happened? Nobody was listening. Everyone was texting, I don't know, looking at Facebook, Twitter, whatever was popular at the time. So basically, nobody was listening. And then he thought a little bit about it. And next year, he attended the same conference. But instead of putting in the Turkish national wear, he put on an American-style dinner jacket. And then everyone was listening to him, everyone got the presentation, and they were celebrating his brilliant achievement. What happened? For those guys who were attending the conference, it was unimaginable that someone who is an astronomer wears this kind of strange clothes. So he had to dress up like those guys in order to be able to talk to them. And you cannot imagine how powerful this observation is, even literally. So that is the beauty of the Little Prince, is that you can read it on so many levels. If you read it as a small child, then it is just a nice little story. And as you grow up and become more and more aware, you can read deeper and deeper layers of the Little Prince. So it is absolutely brilliant. But even on the very surface level, on the very explicit, exact same level, when I was doing one of my first classes about, so in my master apprentice relationship, so my master was sitting in a class and I did one of his classes, and I thought I was pretty good, so I was pretty proud of myself when I was done, and I was completely surprised to be told off. And I was not told off about how I was doing anything in my teaching. I was told off how I dressed up, because I put on a black shirt and a black jacket and black trousers, so I was all dressed in black, and I had no idea, but this was destructive to the students. There was something wrong with me, and of course, after a few decades of experience, I could do a lecture in my underwear, because in 2 minutes I can get my audience forget what I have dressed up like, and they will listen to what I have to say. But as a beginner, that made an incredible difference. And it happened to me a few years later again, but then I did not need to be told anything anymore, because I noticed myself and I was completely unaware on the first occasion. So there was when I studied, we did mostly the studies in the form of integrated master's degrees. So it was a 5-year study. You don't get a bachelor degree during, but you get a master's degree at the end. And I was in the business school, and that year I got invited to kind of do some crossover teaching to the computer and information science faculty. And for them, I was delivering a business information systems lecture. And the first session, I got in as I usually did those days. I put on a shirt, a tie, and a jacket. Well, most of the time I was teaching MBAs. That was a perfectly normal thing to go in like that. And what not many people know about me, I absolutely love ties. So I have a huge number of ties, and I like to wear them. So I went in that setup, and literally nobody was paying attention, and I could not figure out what. And I actually had to ask other people, because I was never there. I did not meet the colleagues from that faculty and so on. And they told me that you are dressed up ridiculously. Every teacher they have wears a t-shirt. So next week I put on a t-shirt, and then it was working. So then they could listen to me. And it was an absolutely fascinating experience that, you know, you read this in The Little Prince and then it happens to you. So that was a really cool story. But this is actually, I'm not just telling you stories. You probably realize that the stories have always a very important meaning in this class. Actually, I had a dissertation student who wrote a dissertation about this, and it was well, supposedly and partly it was about my book, my massive open online course, but actually she did it also for this particular class, what type of stories I tell and how, and all sorts of things that I had no idea about. And I told her that, you know, that I do not plan it the way as you described it. She said, no, I know, but it is still fitting all those patterns that those who study storytelling tell about the stories. So anyway, these stories are very important. This is how you can remember things. And what these stories were about is that when we look at reality, there is some sort of interaction happening. And we have these sort of sayings in many different languages that we see things as they are, and we have sayings like we believe what we see, we trust our eyes, and so on. Is it really true? Or is it the other way around, that we see what we already happen to believe? Which would mean that we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. When I was applying for the position in Strathclyde, it was a lectureship in information management, and I got to the stage that I came to participate in the interview, and part of the interview process is to deliver a mini lecture and presentation about your research. So my friends were very supportive, and when I was leaving Hungary, kind of like the day before I left, I got from them a USB drive. And that was a fantastic new thing at the time. And they bought me, actually quite a few of my friends together, they bought me a 16 megabyte one, which was the biggest possible at the time. And I mean, but most people did not even hear about it. It was so new. So I heard of it, and it was really cool. And as I arrived, I took it out of my pocket and I wanted to use it. And then the head of department at the time, Terry Williams, he started shouting, "Don't let him stick this thing into the computer." I was like, okay, what's going on? So he called the technician, who became later a friend of mine, Howard Ramsey, and he is the e-learning head of e-learning at Strathclyde currently. So he says, is he allowed to stick that thing into the computer? And Howard says, oh yes, of course, I also have one. That's a memory stick. It is a fantastic thing. And not a single person in the department knew what it was. Therefore, they thought it was a threat. They did not want to allow me to put it into the computer, because who knows what happens? Maybe it will explode or whatever. And it works on all sorts of different levels. So when I was a small child, I had a really traumatic experience that they removed the trams in that city. So the trams were fantastic. I loved them. They were so beautiful. It's funny because the same thing happened in Glasgow. So you also had trams here, and they have been removed some time ago. And that was remained kind of a painful memory. And when I started to study at the Technical University of Budapest, as it was called at the time, in Budapest there were trams, and I did not register them. So at least 3-4 times people just grabbed me out from getting under the tram, because I just did not see that they were there. So they were not part of the normal traffic. There is no such thing. Trams were removed. Therefore, there are no trams. So I did not see that they were actually there. So it is, it can be quite dangerous. Another important thing is that there are many things in reality. So there were 2 groups of scientists, and they were observing monkeys, and it was the same group of monkeys that they were observing, and they then independently compiled their reports and submitted it. And one of the oh yes, I forgot to say, one of the groups of scientists were American, the other group of scientists were German. And one of the groups submitted a report saying that, oh, these monkeys are very thoughtful. When they face a problem, that they sit down and they think really deep. And once they figure out what they want to do, then they just go about it and do it. And the other group said, these monkeys are very dynamic. So whenever they face a problem, they start running around and trying out various things. And eventually they figure out how to solve the problem. And of course, these reports were submitted. The same people looked at both reports and they said, okay, so what is going on? So what do you think was going on? let me stop the sharing for a moment. So what do you think was going on? Which of the groups was right? And more importantly, which report was written by which group? Can you guess that?
Sorry, could you say it again? Could you say what the reports were again?
Yes, one was saying that when they face a problem, the monkeys sit down, think, and once they figured out the problem, then they go about and do it. And the other was saying that they try out various things. Basically, they don't think, they just start doing, and they try out various solutions, and finally they stumble upon the right one.
Well, going from the thing that you said, that we see things as we are, I think the American group would have said that they were trying various things without thinking, and just, yeah, and then the German
It is
group.
correct. It is correct. And then the other important question, so what were the monkeys actually doing?
Probably a mixture of both.
Yeah,
so
they were doing both.
Thinking and then acting, and then thinking, then acting.
Yes, of course, they were doing both, but each of the groups were able to see what they could see. And it is astonishing that we are talking about very smart people, so with huge research experience and so on. And I will use a lot of examples from my study of the Nobel laureates. I mentioned at the beginning that I did a bunch of interviews with Nobel laureates. So we will not have the time, unfortunately, to talk extensively about beauty, because it is a very important concept about knowledge. But one of the things that happened in the interviews, that I figured out that the concept of beauty was exceptionally important for these guys. So they were always looking for beauty and this is how they were. So that was kind of guiding their research. And there are lots of stories about that. But one that is relevant here is that we talked with a few of them about the notion of beauty as for example, symmetry. And then I was talking about this with another guy who was Japanese. His name was Yoichiro Nambu. And Yoichiro Nambu says, no, symmetry is a Chinese concept of beauty. Japanese concept of beauty is asymmetry. Guess what? Yoichiro Nambu's discoveries were about quark asymmetries. And most of the people who I looked at so if they were in the area of quarks and quanta, the Chinese and European people were all discovering symmetric things. What is in reality? Again, both. There are certain symmetric characteristics, certain asymmetric characteristics. It is both there, but we can only see what we can see. So this is we can be our own huge limitation, obviously. So let me get back to the slides a little bit. So the important thing is that there is always far more to see that any single one person can see. So do we change things by looking at them? Well, some would believe yes, some would believe no. I will not give you an answer to that. There are certainly things that also perceive you, and in that case, it can certainly happen, but it does not mean that if you look at a rock, you will change the rock. So it depends on what you believe. However, we certainly change by looking at things. So those things that we see in reality will affect us, will influence us. So this is also the reason that we use lots of stereotypes. When we talk about the ways of reasoning, we will call these heuristics. So what are the stereotypes? They help us get through the day faster and make decisions really, really fast. So, for example, if I want to find a good wine, then I can say that, okay, I am going for a French wine because French wine is usually good. Italian design is usually beautiful, regardless whether I look at fashion design or cars. And we have lots of these stereotypes. And if I tell you that I have a friend, okay, let me close the slide again for a bit. So I like this one very much. So I have a friend. He's Italian, black hair. He puts it back like this with brilliantine. He wears dark glasses and dark suit, even at 40 degrees, and he's carrying a violin box. Walks very slow, very quiet, very serious. What is the job of this friend of mine?
A gangster.
Yes, an assassin. No, actually, he plays in the Philharmonic Orchestra. But yes, what I did, I described the assassin from the gangster movies. So this is how stereotypes work, okay? And they are incredibly important. Don't think that they are not good. Of course, they can lead to mistakes, but they can also speed up our reasoning a lot. So, for example, that we don't need to figure out every day whether we should put on the socks first or the shoes, because that's not a trivial decision. We just got used to how to do them. There are plenty of other examples, but let me get back to the slides now and continue. So basically what happens when we look at the reality is that our knowledge changes in this interaction with the reality. So what we see in reality is distorted by what we know. This is really the core message of what I was talking about until now, that it doesn't matter what it is that we see, but it also matters what we know, and we will distort what we see with what we know. And we also filter the input, and that is a very good thing, by the way, because otherwise we will go mad, because there is so much input reaching us any single moment that we could not cope with all of that at the same time. So this is obviously, it can be dangerous if it filters out the trams, as in my case, but normally, for example, what we filter out is that things that are not a big difference. So this is a very important thing when we talk about information later. But so if the floor is not perfectly horizontal, but just a tiny bit into one side, we will not notice that. There is a threshold of perception when the difference is big enough that we can notice it. So the small differences we don't notice. Why? Because they don't make any difference. Okay, and this also means that we can learn our lessons, and we do not need to start everything from scratch every single time. So every single reasoning that we go through, we can get our learning process behind it, and things that we have figured out before, we can just bring along and take things from there, and we can continue the the figuring out. But of course, the knowledge also does not remain intact in this process. It will change as well, but these changes are very, very small at a time and very gradual. But this is how you can understand why I use so many stories, and why I put the stories into this realm of everyday life and fun and that sort of readings that everyone should be familiar with, because you are a very mixed class in terms of your backgrounds. So I need to find things that you have in common. So if it was a corporate course delivered to bankers, I could use examples from banking. It would not be fair here because maybe only 3 or 4 of you are working in banking, everyone else is working in something else. So if this is the case, if we see things that as we are rather than as they are, how can we ever see and recognize anything new? How can we recognize something that we were not taught? And this is a very difficult thing, and most people are not very good at it. And this is why discoveries are so rare, because every discovery means recognizing something that we have not seen before and that we did not think of like that before. For example, one of the Nobel laureates who became a very good friend of mine, Martin Perl, he got the Nobel Prize for discovering something called the tau lepton. Now, you don't need to get a full understanding of what it is, but it is an elementary particle which is almost exactly the same as an electron. There is only one difference: it is 3,000 times heavier. Now, according to what they knew in quantum physics at the time, it was unimaginable that that there could be a particle that is 3,000 times heavier, and otherwise it is more or less the same as an electron. And then at some point, looking at all the tables and data and so on, Martin just managed to imagine that particle. And once he figured this out, so once this possibility appeared in his knowledge, he was able to understand the experimental data, and he called the journalists to announce that he has figured out something really cool. And he did. So there is also a very annoying leftover from an old time of not understanding cybernetics, and it is that we seem to think very often in terms of details, and that we can put together big walls out of the details, and this is not how it works. And this phenomenon, when it was recognized, it was called the Gestalt effect. And the Gestalt effect was so important that there is even a branch of psychology that is called Gestalt psychology. So it was basically the study of how this aspect of perception works. And it is all about the relationship between the whole and the detail. And how our perception works is that we, based on what whole we see, we push some details into the background or bring some other details into the foreground. So look at this picture that I have on the slide. This is a typical Gestalt psychology thing. And don't tell me what you see. It would be unfair that I know so much about you than that would tell me if you tell me what you see. But I will tell you that you should see an ugly old woman and a pretty young girl in the same picture. Now, if you have originally only seen the pretty young girl, then you are okay. So don't worry. If you have seen the ugly old lady, then you are in a really bad mood and you probably hate my lecture and so on. So it is representative. So when it is not done consciously, then it is representative of your current state, emotional, mental, and so on. So once I told you, and this is why I kept talking after I told you that there is a young girl and an old woman, because once I told you, you probably figured out both by now, and now you can at will change which one you see. You just look at it, and if you look at the young girl, you see the young girl. If you look at the old woman, you see the old woman, and you can switch at will between the two pictures. This is an incredible power of the mind. So this is also how our everyday perception works. So I am very close to the university. Actually, I am here in the city center, and I will go out later and take a walk on the high street up north, and there is the cathedral on the right side, not too far. When I get there, I will not see a pile of stones and woods and glasses. I will see a cathedral. And after I see the wall, I can make sense of all the details. I can see that the doors are made of wood and there are some metallic parts of it, and that the walls are made of stones, and that there are glasses in the windows and so on. But all this will only get interpreted in the context of that all being a cathedral. So our senses seem to be kind of putting things into shapes, okay, so that we are perceiving the wall always first, and then we make sense of the detail within the context of the wall. So it is quite the other way around. It is not that the parts determine the wall, it is the wall that determines the parts. So let me stop for a moment just to see if there are any questions or comments or anything. Guys, this class requires a lot of interactivity. I will not be able to do it without that. You will have to play with me on several occasions. So it is better if we talk.
Hi there. Can you repeat again the question that you said, how can we see things for its reality rather than what we see? Can you repeat that part?
Yes, I don't know what you mean by a question, but
yeah, you were just questioning, like, how can we see things as its real, true value rather than what we see it as we believe?
well, there is no such thing. So we will always see through our filters, through our mind, through our senses. So if you and I look at the same cup, we will see that same cup differently. So it does not mean that it is not about the cup. It will still be about a cup, because if we looked at a glass, it would be something different. But we will see it as we can see it. So each of us.
Okay.
So this is a hardcore limitation. You just figure out how to learn with it, and that can be actually very weird. So I, for example, have an exceptionally sensitive sense of balance. So when I flew the first time in my life, as I just started my way to the bathroom, and then the airplane changed the angle. And as I later found out, the angle was very, very gentle. It was almost horizontal, just so like this. It started just to go a little bit like this down. I felt that it is like this, and I held on a chair, and I was like terrified what on earth is going on. And then I look around and everyone else is walking normal. And I was like, how can they walk when we are like in that kind of steep trajectory? And it took me years really to learn, and I still feel the same, but I know that it is incorrect. Okay, so I know that I don't need to hold on stuff, and I know that I can continue to walk, and I don't need to lean forward so much, because it is not that harsh angle. So we can teach ourselves, and you will see many examples of that further in the class, but it is not working automatically. So it is a very conscious effort. Okay, does that help? Okay, here, good, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, yes,
sorry to interrupt. It was just on the point that you were making with the old woman versus the young woman in the photo. What was it that you mentioned, that if you see it initially one way, it might communicate something about your mood?
Yes, so there are different pictures that can be associated with various aspects of mood. So for example, I have a 3-picture version of that picture, where you have a pretty young lady, an ugly old woman, and a kind of serious kind of middle-aged guy. With that one, it would be the feeling miserable would be associated with the old lady, I guess, because it has all the wrinkles on the face, but I don't know the details of that. The pretty young lady is associated with feeling happy and such, and the middle-aged guy is associated by not so emotional state. It is more about rational. So, for example, in terms of paying attention to the lecture, that would probably be what most people would have seen. I just did not want to bring that one because the lecture is early and the other two are more likely. So depending on whether you are good at getting up in the morning, I am always grumpy in the morning. So when I get up, I would always see the old lady first. So.
Yeah, I guess it's just kind of the different, environments or aspects that also affect your perception.
Absolutely, absolutely, and also your cultural upbringing, because what things mean will also be part of how you see things. Okay.
See,
Good,
for the pictures, because you get
Yeah.
loads of these different types of pictures
yes.
that different people see different things. What's your thoughts on the people that can see all the variations in one?
I never came across that. I have seen people who do not notice, but I have not seen. Actually, there was one case. Actually, it was in a classroom about 15 years ago when I told this in the MBA class, and I actually drew my hand around the chin of the old lady and such. And there was this girl who could not possibly see the old woman, and that was a 3-in-1 picture, so she could see the other two. So it is not that she was not able to switch. And I said, you know what, stay like that, don't be miserable ever again. And that's it. So
you've never come across anybody who can see multiple or like all of them in the one, like just instantly look at one of these pictures and be able to see all the variations?
Well, it depends whether you expect it, whether you are used to that kind of thing. So if you have someone who has never seen this type of picture, then they will stick with the first one they see until you point out that there can be more than one, in which case they will automatically start seeing the others. Okay. It is that we can educate also how we can look at things, and we will get back to that later on, because there are some really interesting things about that. Okay.
Victor, do you think that when you were saying about how do we see the new, like people who are maybe like brought up with like quite racist or things like that, and then they build like a stereotype of like Black people or whoever it may be, like that's all related as well, and then they have to like learn how to not be like that? And can you learn to not be stereotypical or whatever?
I could learn how to notice the trends, so I believe that you can. And yes, these are so it is this does not make you, so this simply having heuristics does not make you prone to any specific ideology or associating various characteristics with various physical, so some deeper characteristics with physical characteristics, but all those are rooted in these. So basically any ideology or a form of fascism or chauvinism or anything like that, it builds on these, not necessarily consciously, but it uses the stereotypes and our tendency to use the stereotypes. And that's why it is very important that there is absolutely nothing wrong with the stereotypes, but you need to know that we have them. Okay, so a very funny story from my MBA class when I was in my MBA class as a student. This was in Hungary, and we had a professor from America, and he was playing a little bit of kind of situational stuff with us, and he said, okay, so now every guy stand up apart from Victor. And I had a beard, so that's why he did not want me to stand up. So all the others, now put your finger to the place on your face where you started to shave today. And everyone puts the finger somewhere on their face. Now move it to the place where you started shaving yesterday, and nothing happens. a week ago, nothing happens. First time that you were shaving, nothing happens. And there were like 50 people in the room. So it was a very serious thing, and nobody thought of that. Okay. And the next day, one of my classmates come in with very serious cuts over his face. And then this American guy said that, okay, so you tried to shave differently, haven't you? Don't do that. There is nothing wrong with shaving as you do. You just need to know that it is possible to do other ways as well. You just happen to do it this way the first time and you got stuck with it. But it does not mean that you should change how you shave. Okay, so actually it can be, in this particular case, quite dangerous. Okay. Okay, let me then go back to the slides. So, okay, yes, we did this. So how the meaning works. So you see that particular leaf on the pictures. So what it means, well, here you can see a kind of different interpretation of that. We see things as we are rather than as they are. So this particular type of leaf will mean, if you are a worm, it will mean a cellular structure. No, sorry, if you it will mean food. If you are the guy who is cleaning the park, then it will be garbage. If you are a biologist, it will be a cellular structure. And if you are Canadian, and that's the symbol of your hockey team, so it will be a symbol. Okay, so we assign various meanings to various things, and we can distinguish between signs and symbols, but that's not the time when I will talk about that. So when we see something, that's a picture, but we cannot think with a picture. We can imagine things visually, but that's not really the thinking in terms of conceptual thinking. So we convert the picture into a concept, and then we can think using concepts. And then when we start talking about what we think about, then we need to use words. Now, what is important is that there are two steps of very severe reduction. The picture is a very rich representation, but in order to handle that in the thinking process, we need to reduce that richness somewhat. But then if we want to talk about it, it is a further reduction, and it obviously depends on the language that we can use. So a couple of years ago, I had a guy in this class from Finland. And I happen to mention that, as I understand, the Eskimos have something like 23 words for snow. And he said, yeah, it is more like 39. And he said that he never counted, but he started to tell us. I said, okay, so I never met anyone who had that kind of great variety of snow concepts. So explain to us a few. And he couldn't. So our vocabulary is just genuinely so not set up for that. He said, you know, when the snowflakes looks like this, and then as it is falling down, then you call it this and that. However, when it reaches whatever it was falling on, then it starts moving this way and that way, and then you call it something else. But we don't understand any of what he's saying. We don't see the structure of the snowflakes. We don't see what is happening to it when it falls down and so on. Of course, their snowflakes can be a little bit more strong and powerful than ours here. So we just have one because we don't engage with snow all that much. This also raises a very funny problem, which is obviously more in the realm of science fiction. But if we could do telepathy, would it be based on language or with concepts? So could two people communicate telepathically if they don't speak the same language? Let's say that we only we don't get into the realm of different types of snow, so that they both have the concepts, but in completely different languages. So just an interesting thought experiment to think about. So another interesting question. Okay, I will get back. I have lots of questions today. So, any of you likes to eat fruit? I cannot imagine that. I can imagine that you like apples or pears or plums or mango or whatever. There is no such thing as fruit.
Are you
It
saying
is not a
fruit?
Sorry?
Are you saying like fruit?
Yes. It does not exist. Mango exists, apple exists, pear exists, nectarine exists. Fruit does not exist.
So it's just a category to like group them together.
Yes, it is just in our mind. You cannot eat fruit. That's an abstract concept that we brought together to talk more quickly about some types of plant. Of course, the plant also does not exist. So yes, it is just in our mind. I think it is really funny. I have a few more questions. Let me get back for a moment. So the next is, yes, okay, I just had to check what was the next one. So if I ask you to collect information about the people in this class, could you do that? Who would volunteer to do that for me?
Do what?
To collect information about the people in this class.
Do you only need one person?
Yeah, it is easier because you will not have to do it at the end of the day. So just play with me for a
go
minute.
for it.
Okay, so that is my request. So collect information about the class. What do you do now? How will you go about it?
Well, what do you want to know?
Oh, but I said information about the class.
Oh, ask people in the chat. Put it in the chat.
Yes, and what you will ask them?
Get everyone to put their middle name in.
Okay, I really don't care about people's middle names.
Well, I don't know.
I don't even have one.
Do you have one?
No, I don't.
Is that a British thing?
I don't know. Anyway, until I specify, as you said, you did exactly what needs to be done. I had people who were a little bit overtrained. Funny enough, at a kind of higher level of education, this is very often worse because people get overtrained. And I had a guy who compiled a list of questions within, I don't know, 30 seconds. What will be the things that he will collect? I said, that why those things? It was, I don't know, age, salary. Of course, it was an MBA class, so he was probably very interested in his classmate's salary. So all sorts of things that you would have in a badly constructed questionnaire. And I said, so why these things? Well, because you said that I should collect information. This is information. Yes, and I was actually interested in who is in what kind of mood. So I don't care about who earns how much and such. So the information is a completely undetermined word, okay? So it does not make any sense. So what is in reality does not make any sense until you bring your knowledge to this so that you can actually look at it. And now we are reaching the point that we could provide an incredibly powerful criticism of science, that facts are not factual. So all those things that scientists claim that they are facts that you created in a particular view. You brought your knowledge. That's how you were able to ask a question to find a problem. This was influencing how you conducted your research, and this is how you interpreted what you have seen. So all of this is affected by your knowledge. It is not independent, it is not objective, it is not on its own. It includes you as well. It does not make it wrong. You just need to know that it is not on its own, it includes you. And of course, this also means that other people might find something different. So this is a very hard lesson for scientists, not so hard for us in the world of business and management, because we knew very well that we are dealing with people, so that this is all our daily bread and butter. Okay, some management science models are also possible with this kind of soft approach. It is actually referred to very often as soft OR. So let me share the screen again. And okay, so this was about the information collection. So let me see the next one. Okay, now a big play. I will stop sharing again for just a moment that you see this is a very serious game now. There will be two things that I will show you. So first, I will show you a series of numbers only for 3 seconds, and I want you to remember it. Please don't take a snapshot and read it back from that. That can be done, but this is a very serious psychology experiment. And then after we have done that, we will repeat it with another series of numbers, okay? So I will only leave it there for 3 seconds, and then you try to tell me that you remember, okay? So, oops. Sorry, so let me share the screen again. Okay, ready? So I will show you now for 3 seconds. Can anyone repeat the numbers? Okay, come on, you can at least start.
I got 6.
Start with like 1814, something like that.
I got 184815.
Okay.
I got 1848561990.
Okay, that was awfully close. Can you repeat it, please?
1848 no, 1848561990.
Not too bad. It is not correct, but not too bad. Okay, I will show you one more time. I'm sure that you will remember, but let's see whether the others will. So I share again, and this will be the same series of numbers. We are not on the second series yet. Okay, so okay, anyone? Billy, you have it now all.
No, I missed it.
No, you missed 2 in the previous.
I've the exact same. I couldn't tell you what number I missed. 1848. I think there was a 9, maybe 18489 1956.
19, yes. Now it is correct. Yes. So 184819561990. Okay, let's go now to the other ones. So I will share the slide again, and of course don't start yet, because this is now the same number. And now we continue to the next slide, and again I will show it to you for 3 seconds. Can anyone remember now these 12 digits?
Was it 101056 19452004?
Roughly, yes. I don't actually know these 12 numbers. I know the other ones. But you started to say it differently first. How did you start to say it?
Yeah, I looked at it as like years instead of individual numbers.
Yes, and this is what you should do. Yes, exactly. So, okay, you cracked the points. So I will just share the screen again and show you what the numbers are here. So you actually managed to repeat these without any problems. Why did you not? Did you not do the same with these numbers?
I did with the 1990. That's how I remembered that, because I remember.
Yes,
but the
because which year you were born?
2000.
So probably you have quite a few people around who are born in the 1990s. So that looks more like a date than the rest. Now, actually, these are also 3 dates, the same as the other one. But these numbers, these are 3 dates from Hungarian history. And I use the same 2 series of numbers when I teach in Hungary. And it will be exactly the opposite effect. Nobody will remember these, but everyone will remember these. And usually they will figure out that, that these are dates. So basically what happens is if we can connect it to something else in our mind, in this case, it is about history, then we can remember that. So we will have a break now, and after the break, I will explain to you how these things come together, and this is called the phenomenon of chunking, when we bring things together into bigger chunks. Okay, so this is the things in our minds are organized into units that we call cognitive schema. Schemata is the plural. So a cognitive schema is a meaningful unit in itself, but the size of the cognitive schema is not determined. So it does not make any difference. So in this sense, size does not matter. Okay. So one single letter is a schema, but a word is also a schema, a sentence is also a schema, and a whole poem or a song can also be one single schema. This makes it very difficult to handle, and especially because it seems that despite of the size difference, there is something about the limits of memory that work in these kind of units. So let me stop again for a moment. Who wants to play with me the next one? Just about 30 seconds.
I don't mind, I'll go for it.
Okay, so think of your favorite song or favorite poem. Got it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, what is the 10th word of it?
It's not really got many words in it.
Sorry?
It's not got many words in it, so I can't think of the 10th word.
Okay, think of one which has many words in it.
Under pressure now. Trying to think of one.
So my point is that you probably don't know your favorite song because you could not tell me the 10th words of it.
Yeah, I've got the 10th word.
Okay, but it took time.
Mm-hmm.
You did not know what the 10th word is. You had to count.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a big evidence that the song or poem is not a bunch of words in your mind, and that's why it should be a poem or song that you are very familiar with. In that case, it is one single cognitive schemata in your mind. And if I was asking for the third one, you could probably say it without thinking. But if it is more than 7, actually it is more than 7 plus minus 2, so depending on some personal characteristics, it can be up to 9. That's why I was asking you for number 10, because nobody can tell the 10th one. The only way to tell the 10th one is that you start reciting it in your mind and you count it down.
Yeah.
And this is how we can take a higher level meta schema, because the words that comprise the poem are also schemata. So the poem is a meta schema of the words, the same way as the words are meta schemata of the letters. And you need to deconstruct that higher level meta schema, which is the poem, into words and count them. Okay, so this is a very fascinating phenomenon of how our memory works. Well, fascinating for me anyway. So while these things are meaningful in themselves, some of them are so-called elementary schemata, which do not refer to any other schemata. They refer to something in the world, something in reality. And then the higher, so that would be, for example, the tomato or the orange. But as we said before, that the fruit does not exist. It is a higher level meta schema that comprises all these plants with certain characteristics. Now, this also suggests that we have some sort of hierarchy of these cognitive schemata in our minds. If I say 10, 100, 1,000, you see the order of numbers. What is the next one? I won't even stop the slide for that. Come on, what is the next one?
10,000.
Of course it is. Of course. It is a very logical structure, and it can only be done in one single way. If I say, see, this is the kind of how the biologists figured out these various beings. So if I ask you whether the sparrow is an animal, you need to make 1, 2, 3 steps. Okay, so they started measuring how far these were. So they were asking you, is the sparrow a bird? And people were responding with, I don't remember anymore, 0.3 seconds or something like that, is how long it takes to recall this connection. If they asked whether the sparrow is a vertebrate, that was 2 steps, and it happened to be 2 times the unit from the sparrow and the bird. If they asked bird to vertebrate, it was also 1 unit. So they started to figure that, okay, it seems that always the neighbor is that unit away, and then we can easily figure out, I don't know, if I ask you whether the sparrow is a fish, then you need to go back up to the animals and then down to the watery stuff. So it will be about 6 steps to answer that the sparrow is not a fish. And then someone asked whether the dolphin is a fish. What do you think was the not the answer? I know that you know the answer, I hope at least. But how long did it take for the answer to arrive? How many units? It would be about 6 steps away. And it was 1 unit to answer it. Why? It seems that we have a direct link in our mind from dolphin to not fish. Because why? Because it really looks like fish. So if you don't know much about these things, then you would assume that it is and that it should be, and then you learn that it is not. The same way as you learn that the tomato is a fruit. So it seems that it is not really a proper hierarchy. And if I start talking about things like, I don't know, memory, attention, gestalt, which is the right order? it does not matter. I can put it in any order and I can explain them in any order. You see that I sometimes mention something that will come and how it relates to something else. It is because these concepts in the whole knowledge area are so interlinked that it is just one possible order of concepts, but you will get a much better understanding, for example, of the notion of intuition after we also covered creativity. So there are just so many links, and it is just an arbitrary way how I connect them. And of course, they can refer to themselves and so on. So these, it is very important that boxes can help orientation. So it can help figuring out the whole living kingdom, because the biologists constructed that well-structured hierarchy of the various beings. However, we just should not assume that these boxes are reality. It is all our mental construction. And that way it works really, really well. It can help us reason much faster, but it does not mean that it will become real. So this is how we group various things together. This is called the phenomenon of chunking. So we create these bigger chunks of memory so that we can operate with them more easily. And it is important about these meta-schemata. So schemata that is that does not refer to something in reality, but it refers to schemata that are already in your mind. So these higher level meta-schemata, they dissolve their components, as we have seen with the poem. It becomes one single unit, but we can deconstruct that meta-schema, and we can recreate the constituents very easily. So, come on. Oops. Okay, I need someone to help again. I need an English native speaker, just to make it certainly not interfering. This could be done by anyone. It does not matter. The outcome would be the same, but just that to avoid any confusions, it should be a native speaker. So as you have seen, there is a gray surface, and on the gray surface there are words written with different colors. Now I want to ask someone to go through and say all the words, but not what is written, but the color with which it is written. Okay, so if it says dog and it is written with blue, you say blue, you don't say dog. But if it says red and it is written with blue, you still say blue, you don't say red. Okay, who will do that?
I'll do it.
Okay, so Fiona, you are up next. So I will share the screen now and take you to the next page. You can start as soon as we get there, and do this as fast as you can. Okay, come on.
Okay, red, green, blue, orange, purple, red, blue, red. Oh, yellow. Orange, blue, red, purple, green, red, blue, yellow, yellow, green, orange, red, red, blue, purple, white.
Yes, well, let's say, I think it was supposed to be a very light blue, but doesn't matter. White is fine. So yes, thank you. So, oops, what is happening? Okay, sorry, I managed to. I hope you are still here. So, yeah, okay. I ended the presentation somehow. Give me a second to fix this. So, if I ask you, can you do the same now, but read the words that are written? and again as fast as you possibly can.
Okay.
I just lost the screen again. Okay, sorry. Now I got it back. Here.
Red, green, blue, orange, purple, green, blue, red, purple, red, blue, orange, yellow, blue, purple, red, green, blue, red, purple, red, green, yellow, purple.
Okay, thank you. It was probably less obvious this way because it was the same person doing it. Thank you very much, Fiona. So I don't know if you noticed, but the second reading was faster than the first one. And if it was two different people doing it at the same time, one reading the colors, the other reading the words, then it would be even faster. As you did the colors first, it started to confuse you in the second instance. So if you did the word reading first, it would have been faster than reading the colors. So this is also giving a little bit of indication of how these are structured in our minds. So we are used to the literal, to the verbal, to the reading thing, and we are not so used to handling the colors. So it is, you had to dig a tiny bit deeper into the memory to reach the colors. So let's see the next one. So basically the cognitive schemata are the units that make up our memory. And now I want to tell you about two different aspects or two different parts of the memory. One is sometimes referred to as short-term memory. The other is usually referred to as long-term memory. The short-term memory is more recently usually called working memory. The short-term memory is the old expression, and I will explain why and how. So, Herbert Simon, I hope you know his name. He was a Nobel Prize-winning economist, and he was the first person to ever get the Nobel Prize for something done in management. So he is the guy who figured out bounded rationality and such. We will talk about that later. Anyway, he was a super smart guy. He was also one of the pioneers of artificial intelligence. So he wanted to understand how the mind works, partly to build a really cool AI, but partly simply that because he was interested in this. And he ran a series of experiments to figure out memory better. So one of them was that he took various people and he showed them chess positions. It was always after about, say, 10 moves, so that, 10 moves, because that is well enough into the game so that there is a reasonably big mess, but there are still many pieces on the board. And then he showed it to people for 3 seconds, the same exercise that I did with you with the numbers. Actually, this was the idea for me to get that exercise. So he showed it for 3 seconds to the people, and this is how long the perception takes. So that is a very good reason why it is exactly 3 seconds. And then they had to put back as many pieces on the chessboard as they could. So what he noticed is that it was always 7 ± 2 pieces for those people who were not chess players. So everyone was able to put up 7 ± 2. What is incredibly remarkable is that there was a guy sometime in the previous century called George Armitage Miller, And he actually figured out with pure speculation that the memory limit is 7 plus minus 2. I still don't understand how he did it. I read his paper several times, and it is just an incredible example of the expert intuition for me. So basically, all those guys who were not chess players could always put up 7 plus minus 2. Now, what do you think happened with chess players? So let me get back to you here. What happened when he showed the, let's say, 10 positions, 3 seconds each, and the chess player had to put back the board exactly as it was? So how well chess players performed?
I think they would have been doing, I think they would have done worse, because they might have been focusing on like what they could have done with the chess pieces, like in the actual game, rather than where they were on the board.
Okay, you tackled something that I was going to say in the second round. That happened actually in the second round. But in the first round, this was not the case. In the first round, all the positions were taken from grandmaster games, from, I don't know, some of the best chess players in the world. And in that case, yes?
Sorry, I was going to say, don't chess players study previous games by grandmasters?
Yes.
So
Yes.
they would already have known the moves?
Yes, of course, they were not told that this position is from this and this game. They were just shown a state, and then the chess players were able to replicate. None of the chess players knew all those positions apart from one, but he is a little bit special. So most chess players were able to replicate the position without any mistakes, all the pieces in place, regardless whether they had seen it before or not. The one guy who was different was Garry Kasparov, and he put on the board as it was, and then he said that this is Bobby Fischer against I don't know whom this and this year. So he actually recognized and labeled the positions. And then in the second round, there it happened exactly as Josh suggested before, that they just could not put on the board at all. So they were performing significantly worse than those guys who could not play chess. So what happened? Come on, Josh, you started explaining this. So you said that they would be more focused on the game. So what sort of positions these were? Were they any different from the previous one? What do you think?
Like game-winning positions, like positions that would have taken them further on, or like would have won the game?
No. They did not take them from grandmaster games. They went to the Glasgow Green, and you know, two pensioners playing like 11 a.m. when we start the class. And why the chess players could not put it back? Because it is not chess. It is all according to the rules of chess, to be sure, but you don't play chess that way. Of course, grandmasters don't play chess that way. So this position cannot happen. So that was the essence of it, okay? So depending on what sort of game it was, and you nailed perfectly, Josh, the essence of it, when it was taken from a grandmaster games, exactly because they focus on that it is a game, they were able to replicate it without any problems. If it was an amateurish game, then they could not do anything about it. Okay, so, and they were performing even worse than the amateurs because they were too interested in saying that, okay, this is not chess, this cannot happen in real chess. Now, why Garry Kasparov is a special case, I will tell you a little bit later, But for now, what is important is that he is known as the best ever chess player, at least as far as humans go. So obviously he was beaten by AI, but I will cover that in the data mining class. So it seems for a long time this is roughly what they knew about the short-term memory, and then as they were conducting further studies and experiments and I don't know what, they started to figure out that the short-term memory is not only about storage, it is more like the place where we think. So it seems that the kind of computer analogy is working quite well. The short-term memory corresponds to the RAM, to the random access memory, and the long-term memory corresponds to what used to be the hard drive. Now it is very often SSD, so it is the long-term storage. So that is when they started to rename the short-term memory into working memory, because this is where we work with those thoughts, with those concepts that we have. So, and that leads to all sorts of weird things that we can state. So, for example, if you look at those 3 dates that I have shown you, it seems that it is easier to remember 2 things. So that you have a date and associate an event with it, then this pair is easier to remember than if we are talking about just the date. But of course, the reason is the phenomenon of chunking. So how we are playing with it, because if you try to remember 4 digits, each of them is a schema, and each of them takes up 1 slot in your 7 ± 2 capacity of the short-term memory. But if you look at them as dates, then it is only 3 dates, and the 3 + 3 fits easily into the 7 ± 2 slots. So basically remembering the 3 dates with the 3 events. And of course, if you remember it that way, you don't even need to remember the dates anymore, because it is already somewhere in your already learned things, and you can just recall the events and say the dates. So it seems to be working really, really well. So in terms of what I mentioned before about my use of stories, and especially this kind of everyday stuff in the class, this could be explained as that I am trying to shape these schemata the way that you can connect the new schema to your existing knowledge, and that is how you can actually learn this stuff. So how about the long-term memory? It also has a capacity limit, and this capacity limit is about displayed in this exponential curve. You see that this is an exponential curve. So this is about how many cognitive schemata you can learn over a period of time. And this means that that this also will determine what we will talk about next time, about the levels of knowledge. So how many schemata we can have at different levels of knowledge. So starting from scratch, so from knowing nothing in a particular discipline, reaching what we call, borrowing the term from chess, so we call them grandmasters, the highest level of knowledge. It seems to take around 8 to 10 years, and roughly every 2 years you are getting your number of cognitive schemata in that particular discipline 1 order of magnitude higher. So you should not understand this as 10. It should be tens, hundreds, thousands, and tens of thousands. So they estimate that the number of cognitive schemata of a grandmaster is few tens of thousands. Normally the estimations go between 50,000 and 100,000. So using different methods. Obviously, we cannot directly measure this. So what that would mean for the previous experiment with the chess players. So the reason that the chess players were able to put the positions up, it is because in their mind, they have much higher level cognitive meta-schemata about chess than the amateurs. For the amateur, one piece is one schema. For the chess player from a grandmaster game, regardless whether they were familiar with it or not before, one position is one schema. Okay, so it is all the pieces come together in a pattern and they form a single whole. And they have seen that as they were trying to work a little bit more with various chess players, that it seems pretty consistent that they have these positions as their units, apart from one person. And it is again Garry Kasparov. And this is now what can really explain what was unique about him. He seems to be the only person on record so far who knows more than 10,000 Grandmaster games by heart completely. So it seems that he managed to form a next level of cognitive meta-schemata where a full game is one single unit. And that's really incredible. So Simon was actually working for many years with Garry Kasparov, and it seems that he actually does have this incredible ability to remember games as full games as one single cognitive schema. So this is really the essence of what you need to learn about the short-term and the long-term memory so far. So we will get to that from various different angles in the future, particularly next time when we talk about the knowledge levels. If you want to relate this to the previous story about the knowledge types, then you would say that it is somewhat different types of cognitive schemata that would correspond to different representational systems. So, is there anything, any sort of question or comment or anything that anyone wants to ask? We have a little more, but before we go to this final part, I know that this was very dense about the two types of memory. So if you would be a psychology student, you would have a full semester on that. So any questions, comments, anything? Does it sounds more or less clear and reasonably easy to understand?
Yeah, Victor, I just had one question really. It was about the kind of chess comparison. So for like a grandmaster player, you were saying that kind of one position takes up one unit or schemata, whereas for the amateur player, is it kind of just one piece where it is in the chessboard takes up that kind of one unit?
Yes.
Right, okay. And what's the difference then between, is the position of all the pieces on the chessboard?
Yes.
Whereas, okay, right, that makes sense.
It is so they think about it as the state of the game. So it is a state of the game when the white was doing this and the black was doing that, and this is how the whole chessboard comes together. So they would not think about it that on this square there is this piece. That does not make sense. That's just the characteristic of it afterwards.
All right, okay, yeah, that's perfect. And also, what was the chess player that you keep referring to? Sorry, not
Garry Kasparov.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yes, he stopped playing chess since then, and he had this big story with the Deep Blue. When Deep Blue has beaten him, he was the world champion at the time, and he later stopped playing chess and as a kind of competitive sport. So what he started to do instead, and it is really remarkable, and they don't really like to mention it in the AI community, is that he started playing chess with AI support, and he is regularly beating the AI when he's playing with AI support. So that's a very remarkable thing, and it is fully supporting what I always say, that don't try to replace mediocre people by AI. Try to support the smartest people with AI, and they will be even better. So smart people using smart technology, that's the winning combination. But sorry, it is completely out of the scope of this class.
It's interesting. It's interesting. Thank you, though.
Okay, any other comments, questions? If not, then we go back to the last part. Yes?
Sorry, quickly go over the last question in that slide, the what happens when the schemata are at rest.
Okay, so do we forget things? How we forget things? I will say a few words in the last slide about that, but they don't. So what you store in our memory, it does not remain intact. So when you recall a memory, do you know what the elephant memory is? Okay, I have that. That's when you don't forget. So I just don't know how. So I don't know. I had a 20-year reunion with my elementary school classmates, and we were talking about that there was an event when we recited some poems, and I just recited the poem that I was reciting when I was in the first year of the elementary school. And they said that I was showing off, and that I probably looked it up. And then I said, no, I just remember, but I remember all of it. So I also recited the poems that other people were reciting at that event. So, okay, so this is just kind of a weird thing. Now, it is so annoying to others that when I recall things, the elephant memory does not mean that my memory is more precise than anyone else's. It is just that I don't forget. So I annoyed several people who are close to me, because I recall the same things at different times differently. Okay, because when the memory is stored in the long-term memory, then as you recall it, it will be affected by your current mood, by what you are thinking about, by all sorts of contextual things that are in your current reality, not in that other reality. And basically, it comes up a little bit differently. So basically, the time distorts the memory, but they don't disappear. And it is possible that you remember something at one point, and then in a different situation you don't, and then another situation and you again do. And it is simply because the contextual similarity helps you retrieve a memory. So it is possible that you don't remember a phone number, for example, now, and in a different situation, of course, you don't learn phone numbers anymore because you just dial a name. But when I was young, then we called people with actually putting in phone numbers. And it happened that I forgot the name of someone, and in a different situation, I was able to recall the same number. So anyway, so this is what happens when the memories are at rest in the long-term memory. So they do get changed.
So when they're at rest, they do like morph into like maybe you think of things differently, but they're still there. It's just that
yes.
you just takes a minute to like remember.
Yes, we don't seem to easily remove our memories. Unless they seem to be like harmful or they are getting replaced. So when we figure out that it is wrong, then we might be able to push it out of our minds. But otherwise, it seems that we don't really ever forget anything. We just cannot recall certain stuff. And that's why these, for example, various hypnosis treatments can work, because you can recall memories that you cannot normally recall. So it is as if you have various layers and they get hardened and so on, and it's just more difficult to dig out something that is a little bit deeper. It doesn't mean that it is not there. And all those things that happen to you, that you have learned, that you have experienced and such, so anything that you have a memory of, it affects you. Even when you cannot consciously retrieve that particular piece of memory, it will still affect how you feel about things, how you respond to things and such. Okay?
Perfect, thanks.
Welcome. Okay, so let me go to the last one. I lost my mouse again. I don't know why this is happening, so I need to. Oh, come on. Do you see now? Just not the right thing. Do you see the slide? Yeah. Okay, good. So this last part that I did not tell you about is something that you already asked, but the other part is that those memories that we retrieve a lot, that we retrieve often, they will have an increased fitness. So it is when you use them and they they are helpful, so they work for you, then it feels as if they become easier to recall every time. And if you let them, so if you don't use them, they will not be forgotten. They are just kind of getting under many layers and they become a little bit more difficult to retrieve. So here are two pictures again. Now my question is the bottom one the continuation of the upper one? So is it two halves of the same picture?
It could be.
Okay. Any other opinions?
I don't think so.
Okay. Why do you think so? Why do you not think so?
Because on the top picture at the very right hand side, it's like a rectangular, like a 3-dimensional rectangle. But on the second image, it's circular, or it's a cylinder shape.
See?
Mm.
The problem is that you wanted to manufacture it. You looked at it as a 3-dimensional object. It is not a 3-dimensional object. It's just a bunch of lines, nothing else. Okay. But this is what we do. Okay, and this is amazing that we pose limitations to our own thinking because we assume things that are not necessarily really there. And this is what we refer to as thinking inside the box. And that's why thinking outside the box is a very useful thing. So you just don't lock yourself into the box that you look at it as an object, and then it is easily possible. I liked very much how you answered, Fiona, that it could be, not necessarily is, but it could be, because obviously you cannot see very precisely whether it is exactly the same distance, and so it could be a little bit different. But this was not that kind of exercise. There will be that type of things as well later on in the semester. So
see, if you always think like that, though, you'll never come to a conclusion. If you're
that's correct.
It could be, or it might be. If you're looking for an actual answer, then you would think about it that way that I was, if you get me.
You are perfectly right, and this is why we need to figure out the right balance. So if you questioned everything, that as Chris Argyri said, he's one of the gurus of management, then we could never got out from our bed in the morning, because by the time we made all the decisions that is needed to get out of the bed, it would be evening again and we need to go back to sleep. So yes, you are perfectly right. We cannot rethink everything from scratch every single time we face something. So we need to make a very good use of the time and our mental capacity to occasionally question some things, but it is very useful to be aware of what sort of heuristics we are working with, where we are logged into the box, and so on. And the other thing is that when I told you about the amount of knowledge in a particular discipline, I did not tell you that each of us has that amount of knowledge all the time. The difference between the, I don't know, chess grandmaster is not between how many cognitive schemata they have in their long-term memory. We all have the same, 50 to 100,000. They just have more of these about chess, and they have a much more data of higher level of complexity. Okay, so when you learned that a full position is one single cognitive schema, then you dissolve a lot of those single piece on the board position parts. So basically, the higher level cognitive schemata are getting more and more complex, but they reduce how many lower level ones you need to store. So this is how we become better in a particular discipline, not just piling up more and more information. Okay, there was a very nice Zen story about this, when the guy approaches the Zen master and asks him to become wants to become the disciple of the Zen master, and the Zen master offers him a tea, and he starts pouring the tea into the cup, and the cup is full, and he keeps pouring, and the cup is overflowing. And of course the guy thinks, oh, what kind of master I have found for myself, he cannot even pour a tea. And then the Zen master says, see, your head is like this cup, it is full. I cannot pour anything more into it because it will overflow like this cup. Then he takes the cup, throws out the tea that is in it. You need to empty your head and puts it back and starts pouring the tea so that I can pour something new into it. So that means that our head is always full. So we cannot learn the way that there is empty space that we just fill. It is a very complex process in which we use certain elements that we pull together, that we put on a higher level, thereby we create space for some additional things, and we are occasionally replacing or displacing certain previous knowledge with something newer. And we can very often mix together things that belong to different realms if we get used to them going together. So, for example, Marvin Minsky, the AI guru, had this example in one of his books, that he said that if there was a weird planet on which everything that is green is square and everything that is red is round, then those species would not have separate concepts for the green and the square and for the red and the circle. So they would, if you would show them something that is green and circular, then they would not understand what it is. They would say that this is something that is green, but it seems red. So it takes time. When you see that two things go always together, then it becomes one concept. And when you try to separate them, it takes very conscious effort, and basically you need to unlearn that those two things necessarily go together. So it means that if we would not be able to do that, if we could not deal with the stuff that is in our heads, if we could not unlearn things, if we could not destroy certain things that we have learned before, we could never learn anything new, and we could not ever create anything new. So it is very good. The unlearning is at least as important concept as learning is. So I had just a few more stories to illustrate the same things. So I will stop here because we ran over the class. So you will still have some reading for this topic as well.